The other one is the red light, and this is dorsal vagal. And this is whenever we encounter threat, but we recognize that doing something about it isn't going to help us. So like you can't fight our way out of this. We're not going to be able to outrun this. So you can imagine like an animal would likely, you could just play dead. If you can't outrun the thing, you might hide from the thing.
Okay.
So this is dorsal. And this is when actually the system shuts down. Lizards do this. This is the oldest part of our brain. So there's hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And this is the oldest one, is that we shut down. This is disassociation. This is even just a feeling of helplessness. Like I like to imagine like you're arguing with somebody and you're like, I need you to do this because you said you were going to do it. But when you realize that what you're saying isn't getting you anywhere, you're just like, whatever. That's the switch into dorsal.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of I Love Being Sober, sponsored by Camelback Recovery, Arizona's preferred mental health and addiction treatment option to help newcomers on their path to recovery. If that's you or someone you know, then you're in the right place. Because my name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery here in the always sunny and always sober Phoenix, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people to stop their suffering and continue on their path to recovery. Today, we explore the inspiring journey of Cole Chance. Cole's life has been a tapestry of seeking and discovery. From the shadows of addiction to the farthest corners of the globe, her path has been both challenging and enlightening. As a guiding light in the world of recovery, Cole brings her expertise as a trauma-informed yoga instructor to various platforms, from captivating international retreats and teacher trainings to meaningful sessions in rehabs and even prisons. Her teachings, Cole intertwines the ancient wisdom of yoga and Buddhism with the insights of modern neuroscience and psychology. At the heart of her approach is a commitment to compassionate self-inquiry, encouraging a deep exploration of both the mind and the body. She empowers her students to peel back the layers of their experiences using curiosity and intellect to uncover greater freedom and understanding. Join us in this episode as we delve into Cole's philosophy and teachings and discover how to navigate life's complexities with grace and self-compassion. Cole, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for that introduction.
Absolutely. This is awesome. Mary Tilson connected us, and she said great things about you. And I'm just excited to get to know more about you. I'm a yogi as well. I'm almost certified. I just have to finish my observation hours, and I'm officially certified, so I can start teaching yoga.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So let's dig into your story. What was it like, and what happened?
Oh man, it was hard. It started out really fun though. It started out great. I really found, I believe that, our substance use is really a solution to lots of things, especially in the beginning. It ends up being not a solution at all, but there's a part of us that's hurting and we find something that helps us. And in the short term, it's quite effective to change the way we feel. So whenever first time I drank, I was about 13, and I was having a lot of social anxiety without knowing what that meant. So as a 13-year-old, I was just like having something happening within me that I didn't feel okay. And I remember the first time that I drank, it was immediately like I filled out my skin. Like all of a sudden I felt like myself. I felt like bigger than my body almost. It's like I found the golden ticket. And I really clearly remember feeling like my life turned into Technicolor. And I didn't even know that I had been living in black and white. Like kind of reminds me of that Wizard of Oz moment with Dorothy. But I didn't realize that I had been living in like this kind of darkness. And all of a sudden, just wow. This is it. And I remember that very first night that I drank. We were like at my friend's pool. Her older siblings or something had somehow gotten booze. And I remember even got sick that night from drinking, but that didn't matter. I didn't remember that part. But I remember laying in our pool and like looking up at stars. And it's like I had my whole life in front of me. And I just remember thinking like, I'm going to do this forever. So clear. I remember saying that to myself. I'm going to do this forever. And damn if I didn't try. That, just became that was what I was going to do. However,
so 13 years old, that was your first drink. And then how quickly did it progress? Was it just alcohol? Would you say that's your drug of choice, is alcohol?
Drug of choice. But yes, it definitely got very open-ended.
Yeah, right. Okay. So walk me through the progression of like when did you realize you first had it? Like when did it go from being fun to, wow, I think I might have a problem?
It took a while, and I always thought that I was just partying really hard. I definitely partied, harder than other people. But I really prided myself in this. I was normally the young one in the group, hanging out with like older people, so I really needed to prove myself. Like this is what was happening inside my head. Like I needed her to hold my booze. I needed to prove that I like deserved to be at the party or whatever, all these little things. I'm quite competitive. I've always played sports my whole life. So it's like I kind of took that competitiveness like into my consumption. And but I remember the first time that I remember actually being like, oh, there's a problem, even though I was having lots of consequences in terms of I think I'd had a DUI. I was, waking up with ridiculous hangovers and things like this, but it kept seeming situational. But I was in Santa Cruz, California. I was living there. I'd moved out there, and I was feeling what I thought was depression, maybe. And I was shaking in the mornings, and I remember thinking, I have to quit drinking coffee.
Of course, it's the coffee.
It's the coffee.
Yeah.
I have to quit drinking coffee. And at the same time, I started putting vodka in my orange juice. Somehow, the way that my denial works is that both of those things happened, yet I still could walk away blaming it on the coffee.
Yes, of course. That makes sense.
Yeah. But then this was like my second golden ticket moment because something was not okay. I was not okay again. And when I started drinking in the morning, I was like, okay, done and dusted, figured it out. But there was a part of me that wasn't very loud, but there was a part of me that recognized that this now is a problem. Because I was in scenes and scenarios where I was with people who were big partiers. A lot of us ended up having issues later on. But at that time, like I was starting to hide booze from my partner who was a very severe drinker. You know what I mean? Like I was additionally hiding myself from already a big scene of substance. So that was kind of registering a little bit of like, okay, there's something a little bit different here.
Now, okay, so where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And then I moved to Missouri. In my younger days, I just kept kind of getting in trouble. Something would happen, they would move me a place.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's actually where I learned my geographic, how my family would do that. Yeah. Is that I would get in trouble and then they would move me. I would get in trouble and then they would move me. So then I carried on that.
Shit hits the fan and I move. Shit hits the fan and I move. I can relate. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how old were you and how did you end up in Santa Cruz?
I lived in kind of Colorado for a while. Whenever I turned like 21, I was out there as bartending, snowboarding, partying, really easy to hide in ski resorts. Everybody wakes up and has Bloody Marys.
Yeah.
Like it was really easy for me to do that. And I met this beautiful man and I had never seen the ocean or I'd never been to California. So we drove out there and we moved to Santa Cruz and we lived in some commune in Santa Cruz. That's how we ended up there.
Okay. Yeah, I went to school at UC Davis and then I lived in San Francisco. So I'm very familiar with the Bay Area.
Yeah, yeah. So I spent a few years living between Santa Cruz, Lake Tahoe, and up in Humboldt.
Okay, I was gonna say Lake Tahoe. Where did you live in Tahoe?
We're in South Lake.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I love Tahoe. I mean, I went to Davis, so we always had our season passes to Kirkwood, and season passes to Kirkwood were $200.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such a different game these days.
I think that's the cost of a day pass these days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, probably, probably.
Okay, and then now you're okay. So keep on keep on going with your story. So you're in Santa Cruz. You're drinking orange juice with vodka, and coffee is the reason why you're having problems, not alcohol.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's kind of just a I ended up getting I had several DUIs, but one of the DUIs that I got up in Humboldt whenever I was up in Arcata. But I remember that was the first time that I was court ordered. So the first time that I went to AA. I had
Mm,
already been in a treatment center at this point, at least one, I think. But I kept ending up there. I ended up going to about 6 or 7 treatments. But I
okay.
think at this point, maybe I'd only been to one. But wasn't supposed to be there though.
Of course not. Yeah, you didn't you
I was
definitely
the
didn't
one
belong
that
you
wasn't
definitely
supposed
didn't belong there. Okay.
So one of them at this point, I don't think I'd been into many. I think when I got that DUI, when I first went into AA, I don't think I had been to many rehabs yet. And I remember I was living in South Lake and I had to walk down my street and right next to the liquor store, there was a AA meeting. And I remember it was snowing and I was terrified. I'm like,
Yeah,
I do not want to do this. I do not belong here. And
yeah,
walking into that AA meeting, just terrified. And the whole time I was in there, I just made all of these reasons why I was not like these people.
of course.
I was not like these people. So I think I went in and out, and I was normally had probably wine and my Nalgene, and I just went to get the check mark. I wasn't supposed to be there. I went to get
Mhm,
the check. And that's a big part of my story is the denial, is that I continue to not belong in these places where I ended up. And I started having some pretty severe like physical consequences not too long after. It really took a toll on me quite deeply pretty quickly. I was severely shaking in the mornings. A few years later, I had to like stop. I was a kind of an all day drinker, as we've recognized. I start in the morning and I drink all day, and
mhm,
I black out by the end of the night. But I had a grand mal seizure whenever I was about 24. I had to
mm.
like fly home for my grandmother's funeral. And I had about 3 days in, I was still drinking a little bit, but not very much because I was with my family. And about 3 days in was her actual funeral. And that evening I had a grand mal seizure from withdrawal, which ended me
Wow.
up in the hospital for about a week at with my whole family in town. And that's something that I would do a lot is I would kind of like have some big colorful outburst that took the attention. Like I would do these crazy things that would take the attention, and that wasn't purposeful, but that's the way that my addiction kind of played out.
Mhm, mhm.
And same thing here. Whenever we're at the doctor is telling my family she's an alcoholic. Everybody knows this already. And I find somewhere on Google that 1% of people have grand mal seizures because they're in stress, and I'm like, get off my back. My grandmother just died.
Right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm
Wait.
having this because I'm stressed. And it's not about the alcohol. It's
Mhm.
because I'm stressed. So again, really, really, really deep in this denial. So that ends up being kind of the thing is that I end up hitting a wall. I'll be somewhere. I move around a lot. I'll be somewhere and I'll end up hitting a wall to where I'll end up in treatment. I'll end up either hurting so bad physically,
Mhm.
or I'll have like lost my job, lost my car, lost something, and then like I'll somehow reach out for help and I'll end up in treatment. I'll sober up a little bit, and then I recognize that I'm actually not supposed to be there, and
Okay.
that happens multiple times. And my
How many how
family's
many how many times do you go to treatment?
6,
6 times? Okay. And then
6, yeah.
denial, well, I know denial was a big part of your story. Well, first off, actually, I wanna go back to is there anybody in Humboldt County that doesn't smoke weed?
Probably not. No, I mean, there are. I actually have some sober friends there, and it's quite a challenge for them. But I actually have.
I would imagine. I mean, like that's the
Yeah.
is that considered the weed capital of the world, or just the country, or just California?
It it used to be, but now I mean, it it's changed a lot there since legalization. A lot of
Right.
people
Well,
have.
I guess it's legal everywhere now, so that used to be the place.
It definitely used to be. So I was up there trimming. So I
Okay.
would go up there in the summers and work on the farm. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So, would you just smoke weed, or would you smoke weed and drink?
Weed, I didn't even smoke that much because it messed with the way that I drank.
Ah, of
So
course.
if you drink, I was always drinking a lot. I always had alcohol in my system. I was not morning to night I'm drinking, but I'm not like shit faced because remember I have a really good tolerance and I present very well
Right.
because I need to be cool.
Yeah.
But if I smoked weed, then I could start to get a little bit dizzy. So I actually didn't smoke that much. That wasn't one of my things. I was more stimulant,
Mm,
alcohol or cocaine. I could drink longer.
yeah, of course. Yeah, and I would say people they're typically they either like the downers or they like the uppers. And like for me, I liked alcohol and cocaine, and I like the stimulants. I like to go fast.
Yeah.
And weed, there was a period of time where I smoked weed, but it made me paranoid. I didn't like it, and to your point, it kind of made it to where I couldn't really drink. And I like things that promoted my drinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't want it to interfere. I might use it to come down. Like I might use it formulaically,
Right, right.
like after a bender.
Huh.
And I needed to when I was ready to, yeah, but typically no.
So denial. When did you realize you were in denial? When did you finally? I mean, because I guess denial. First off, denial. How did that play a part in keeping you drunk or making it to where you couldn't really get sober?
Oh, it had everything to do with it because I believe, whatever the stories of our mind create our reality. So I didn't know what the issue was with everybody else. And I really needed them to get off my back. And I'm really stubborn. And I was really stubborn in my denial.
Hmm.
And that register that left me incapable of seeing what was happening.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting. It was very apparent to everybody around me. Like it was not there was no kind of wonder here, especially towards the end whenever I started to crack around having to be able to present in any way.
Hmm.
Like I was okay, but yet I couldn't see it. It was just so situational. It was this place, it was this person, it was this you're prude or you're my parents or you're no fun. I'm too young. Yeah, all of these reasons. But I think I really recognized that if I admitted that I have a problem, I was going to have to do something about it. And that was not going to happen because I didn't know how to actually be in the world without substance.
Hmm.
And in, many treatments, I think that sometimes I would drink on the plane ride home. Like that would be something I would do.
Right.
A few times I would have like a month sober. I might go to a sober living place for a little bit, but then, that doesn't work. But there were moments, but typically in those sobriety moments, I was kind of like looking at like, could this be a life? Absolutely not. Really thought that sobriety and recovery was going to be horrible. Like I
Hmm.
actually thought it was going to be horrible. I was not somebody who was like, they really want to try, they really want to get for
Right.
this, and it's still hard. I wasn't in that lineup. I was absolutely not wanting to do it. I recall telling my therapist once, she was telling me like, she's like, "You really gonna have to get real with yourself, Cole. Like you're not gonna like you will die of this if you don't stop." Just like the physicality of me. And I remember she was just really trying to get me to understand the gravity of it. And I remember saying, "Well, then buy me a fucking rocking chair because my life is over." Like about sobriety.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And I really thought that. Like I really, really thought that I was that deep into it. It was just so interesting. And I recall a time with a therapist too, and she was trying to get me to imagine like what it would be like. What if you just came home from work? Like what would it be like? You just came home from work and what would you do when you got home? And I'm imagining like, well, I get home and I'd have to open a beer or have a glass of wine. She's like, and what if you didn't do that? And I remember like I was quite stoic. Like I wouldn't ever really want my therapist like to see me hurting or any of this stuff. But I remember like imagining this visualization of not being able to come home and like pour this glass of wine, and it like cracked me open. And I just was bawling. And it helped me to understand more so in hindsight that how frail I was without the covering of the substance.
Mm-hmm.
How to imagine being in the world without that crutch made it feel like I didn't have skin on.
Yeah.
Like that's how deep it was. Like I was actually like I was walking around skinless. Like that's how vulnerable it felt.
Right. Right. That's your solution.
Mhm.
Was there a specific point in time when you realized that you were in denial?
Not into the very, very, very end. Very, very, very end.
Huh?
Which at the very end, I was in Austin, Texas. I had been into another treatment, sober living, hid alcohol all over the place in the sober living place. Been in and out of a few detoxes after that. Ended up on the east side of Austin at a crack house.
Mm.
Just at this point, I did have a sober community in Austin because I had went to treatment there. But whenever you relapse, you know other people who have already relapsed.
Right.
So then, of course, I'm with this little pod of people who they want to be validated in what they're doing, and I need to be validated. It's like at this point, we're not partying; we're just validating each other, So we're using together. So there's no fun really involved. It's just we're just getting really high. And at this point, I start using heroin
Mm.
in the end,
Okay.
and for about 3 months.
Which is a downer.
Yeah. Which listen to the
Yeah.
denial little piece here is that I'm trying to not drink, but I can't not drink because if I withdraw, I start shaking and I'm scared of having the seizure. Like there's this thing. I
Mhm.
keep going to the hospital. They give me benzos, or maybe they don't give them quick enough, or maybe they do give me what I want. I check myself out. I start drinking again. It's this cycle that once I start having the pain of the withdrawal, I can't. I give back in. I have to start drinking again. So I have this idea with my friend who is a heroin addict that because I don't drink on opiates, I didn't like opiates because they made me not be able to drink. They made me tired. So we have this idea that this could maybe help me get off the alcohol if we try the heroin.
Yeah. Sounds brilliant.
Sounds brilliant because really the problem is just the booze.
Mm-hmm.
Now at this point, now there is an issue,
Right.
but I'm going to fix it with the heroin. So that's how that started.
Wow.
And luckily, about 3 months in, I overdosed.
Mm.
And I was with two of my friends who I went to treatment with. And I don't know, like it was overdose, stroke. It was a weird thing that it's like we were all standing, and I remember my knees buckling. And I was trying to say, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. And my voice, my mouth was going, "Rah, rah," like that's what was actually coming out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just woke up. I don't know how long it was afterwards. Everyone was gone. And I woke up and my brain was electrocuted. Like I had never felt this sensation before of
Mm-hmm.
when I came to. And I had to get across to Austin to this little house that I had rented from some old Mexican man. Like I don't know how I'd ended up in this spot. It was across from a liquor store. And I remember I was trying to hitchhike down and I couldn't turn my head because my head had been electrocuted. I couldn't turn my head one way or the other to get across I-35. I'd have to turn my whole body. I just remember that registered, and it was like August in
Mm-hmm.
Austin. I eventually make it home and I buy a bunch of booze from the liquor store across the street, and I have whatever pills I have. And I'm like, this is going to take me a while to nurse myself back to health. And this is the way that I nursed myself, was with more substance.
Mm.
And I treated it like I needed to drink. I needed to do these things. I needed to, make myself feel better. And I was doing all these things, and nothing was changing. There wasn't any relief. It wasn't a salve. And it started to really scare me. And I recall there's two things that came back into my mind. And one of them is I remember in the rooms, thank God for those cliches at the time, you're like, but they stick in there somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember somebody saying, one day it's just not going to work anymore. And I was like, Oh my God. And, in hindsight, I really feel like what they were talking about is like one day the shit you're doing is not going to work anymore. Like this
Mhm.
life isn't going to work anymore. But
Right.
what I took it to mean in that moment is that one day the substance isn't going to work anymore.
Right.
And I was like, this is the only thing I knew. Like, if you're saying this isn't working, there are no options. And I just, even just now, just felt that terror in my body. Like I was terrified.
Hmm.
And then I recall something that somebody at that recent treatment had told me, because I remember asking her, like, how did you do it? Like, I didn't want to actually do it, but like, how did you do it? That
Right.
kind of question. And I remember her saying, you're going to come to a point where you realize that you can be high or you could be happy. And then I thought, and she said, like, at one time they used to go together. And then one day you'll realize that they'll never go together again.
Oh.
So both of those things, like there was this moment that both of those things, like the bubble of my delusion got really thin. And I remembered both of those things like almost at the same time, sitting in this little room in East Austin in this dark little house with all of my bottles around me. And both of those things just went into me. And I was like, oh, and it was horrible. And I called the sober living place that I had been kicked out of. And I was friends with the house mom. And I was known to be, not wanting to do what anyone was wanting me to do. I was pretty known as not wanting to get sober.
Yeah.
And I called her.
You were a terrible client.
It was a terrible client. And everybody knew it. They
Yeah.
wouldn't even
Right.
take me into any of the rehabs in the area.
Right. Right. Right.
They're like, what are we going to do for you? It's like, yeah. Mm-mm. And I called her and I said, I need help. And also everybody knew that I never said that. And for
Right.
whatever reason, she shouldn't have done it. There was only one sober living house in Austin that takes people that are high risk, meaning that they didn't just come out of treatment.
Okay.
And there's only one bed in that one house that takes people who don't have any money, because they don't have any money anymore.
Mm.
She let me back in and she shouldn't have, because I had hid liquor all over their sober living house just a
Right.
couple months prior and passed out on their lawn.
Right.
Like just all of this shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, okay, be here on Wednesday. And I had to make it 3 days. And I did what I needed to do to make it those 3 days. So I definitely wasn't, I cleaned up as much as I could. But I showed up on Tuesday night and I said, I will sleep on your couch. And she said, come on. And that was it.
Wow. And that was it for you.
It was 10 years ago.
Okay. What's your sobriety date?
August 27th.
So there's lots of other people like you that have been in and out of treatment multiple times, and they go to treatment. They don't want to go to treatment. They're forced to go to treatment. They go to treatment for whatever reason. They're in sober living. They're doing all of these things. Would you say that all of that was a waste, or would you say that you needed to do all of those things that you did, and all of those things are what got you ready when you were ready?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I don't think that they were for nothing. But I mean, I think I also speak to people and I say, it's not going to do a lot of good until they're ready, but it will do something. I do think that it builds. It does build. Just like the two things that came in my mind, had I never heard those,
Right.
like I never heard that. And so it builds. It does all build. So I
Right.
don't think it was for nothing. And I believe that our lives are a culmination of what has happened before. As well, like that is something that happens. So I don't think that it is a waste. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about that. If we would have pulled one thread out,
Mm-hmm.
what
Right.
would have changed?
Right. In my opinion, it's never you went to treatment and it was for nothing because you relapsed when you got out. That's not really true.
No, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I see I mean, I don't believe it was for nothing. Absolutely not. And it's interesting, like it might not be the one,
Right.
nothing. It's absolutely not for nothing, because we don't know. You just don't know what's going to be the one, but there is a difference on the the effectiveness of whether the family is sending somebody to treatment or if the person is asking. There is a difference. And it doesn't mean that it's still not worth it,
Right.
but there will be there's likely going to be a different outcome.
Right.
Because in order to say that you need help, especially for somebody who has been through it so many times and has been in denial, that takes a lot of humility, and it's mortifying. And it's almost like to walk through that gate to say, I need help, to actually say that after so long of being like, I'm fine.
Right.
That's when it's like someone needs to be there and ready to open up the doors for that person.
Right. Yeah.
Because it closes right back down. You know?
And I knew when I saw him call, I knew I had to answer.
Yeah.
It's like, because I knew, like, okay, now is the time. It's strike when the iron's hot.
Absolutely. And that's what I try to share with families and things like that. They're like, what do I do? It's like, you got to wait for when they're ready. But when they're ready,
don't wait.
Don't
like,
wait.
Get them to, like, do whatever you need to do to get them to treatment.
Have the plan ready. Have the plan ready. Like, pull that cord, like pull the parachute right whenever.
Right.
It's right whenever they like, give you the look.
That opportunity can be very small.
Yeah.
So you got to jump on it.
You got to jump on it. And that's kind of what I have, this visualization of this denial, this bubble of denial that the addict lives in, is that it can be so thick. It can be so thick and like no one can pierce it. It cannot be penetrated. Like there's no way. I'm doing what I want. I'm fine. But like that viscosity, like that changes. And sometimes it's thin and you can hear a little bit and they're like taking in a little bit. And then sometimes, very few times, is it really thin. Mm-hmm. And it's like when that veil is thin, like that is the time, because it's like, it's an alive thing. Like the delusion is an alive thing and it gets big and small and shifts.
Yeah. Let's talk about spirituality. Were you spiritual before you got sober?
Very much not. I came from a very Christian upbringing and I wanted nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Nothing.
What changed?
One of my treatments that I went to one of them was in Santa Cruz. It's called the camp. And that was the first time that I ever took a yoga class. Mm-hmm. One of the teachers back whenever then, which is surprising, only two of the 6 treatments I went to had yoga.
Was the camp in the woods kind of? Okay. Yeah. I've visited the camp. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the teacher was a recovered heroin addict. Mm-hmm. And I remember they took me in there and I was detoxing. I wasn't even really supposed to be in there, but my room wasn't ready. So I just like went and laid on the back of a mat. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was like shaking and I could smell myself. And it was just like, it was horrible. I hated myself. And I was in this the yoga room was in this like greenhouse and it was gorgeous. And there was like birds chirping. And I swear they were like cartoon birds. Like everything was so beautiful, except for like what was happening with me. The teacher's voice sounded like an angel. And like everything was just so lovely. Uh-huh. And I remember her saying that like she was a heroin addict, And I remember looking at her and not believing her, like trying to like see her addict part like on her.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't believe it. But anyway, I just say that because like I remember just feeling that paradox of like how I felt to like what was happening around me. And we did yoga pretty much every day throughout that treatment. And it really affected me. And I didn't really know why. I just knew that there was something here. And there were a lot of Buddhist books there. And I started looking into that as well. And I was like, wow. I even have a rock that I painted from that rehab, because that's what we do in rehab a lot. It's paint rocks. Right. And it has on it, which is like a Buddhist word. And it's from probably like 15, 16 years ago. I still have it. And I was dabbling. I was looking, this is kind of interesting. But I remember leaving that treatment. That's the one I think where I drank on the plane home. But I remember saying like, if I get sober, like if I get sober, and the other part of me says, but we're not. Like, I remember that happening. If I do, but I'm not. Right. But if I do, I'm going to look into this yoga and Buddhism thing.
Okay.
And so it planted a seed. And from that point, I started, if I was doing okay, I would go to a yoga class. Or I would go to like a Zen center, but it would be very far and few between. And I would kind of watch the people there. I'd kind of just be like, what? I was interested in them. Like I would listen to what the girls would talk about after class. They would be like, "Do you want to go get tea?" And I'd be like, "Okay, tea date." Like I've never been on a tea date. Like who
Right.
are these people? They're like
Mhm.
aliens to me. But I just started like watching and I started dabbling. So I might like pick up a Buddhist book. It would be on my shelf. I'd look at it every now and again. So it was very small, but I was very interested. And that started then. So there's another seed that was planted in a treatment to which I relapsed immediately.
Mhm.
A very important seed was planted there. And that continued on. So whenever I finally got sober there in Austin, I signed up. There was like some 30 days for free downtown Austin. And I
Right.
started to yoga. I knew that yoga at that point. At that point, I knew that that was the only quiet place that I had in my life is I would go to a yoga studio and I would like get in child's pose and I normally just start crying because it was the only space in my life where I was quiet because the rest of my life was very loud. So there was something about that getting quiet and just checking in with myself. So that's kind of was the beginning of my spirituality was just being able to check in with myself, having a self relationship.
Right.
And normally what I saw was not very good at that point.
Right. Now, I see a lot of people in recovery are into yoga. I mean, I started doing yoga when I got sober, and I mean, today, I swear, every yoga class I go to, like 30% of the class is in recovery.
Yeah.
Why do you think people in recovery are so drawn to yoga?
I have different theories, and it's really interesting. I think that what for one, it combines, it's not just physical, but there is this mixing of like the soma and the psyche. And typically it's one or the other. Like we're going to the gym or we're going to a meeting or
Mhm.
something, and they're very separate.
Right.
But we are not separate. We're happening, we're woven in. So I think that yoga really supports in weaving both of those things together. So when you have like a really great teacher and they're weaving in inquiry questions through the practice and you're moving and you're breathing, which is a really, really big component of it. Because so much from our nervous system wise, we're in stress when we're in our active addiction and we're often really stressed in our recovery as well. Like we're going through a lot of changes, so we're not regulated. And we can't tell ourselves to calm down, we can't therapize ourselves to calm down because the nervous system doesn't understand language. It understands breath, it understands our body. So we have to enter through it that way, and yoga supports you to do that. So I practice the style of vinyasa. So it's very flow based. So it's inhale and exhale, and it really doesn't matter that much about the body postures, but I'm regulating my breath for a whole hour. And I leave feeling fine.
Mm.
Like not like I'm fine, but I mean I leave feeling fine. Like it feels good. How much
Right.
of it has to do with opening my body? Probably some of it, but I really think a lot of it has to do with I've just spent a full hour breathing regulated, and that doesn't happen in our day to day. I hold my breath a lot. I notice myself holding my breath.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and if you look around at people and you pay attention, most people have shallow breaths.
Yeah.
And I actually, when I started doing triathlons, I started seeing a guy named Larry Arnold. He's kind of one of my coaches, one of my fitness instructors. And I wanted to do Ironman, and I couldn't run more than like 5 miles without my IT band hurting.
Mhm.
And he watched me run for like 50 feet. And he said, "Stop, just stop. No more running. No more running for you." He said, "You're not breathing. You need to open up your hips." Da 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 da. And then he had me do some boxing, and I was so out of breath, and my mind was spinning, and I was dizzy. He said, "See, I told you you're not breathing." So he had
Mm.
me go take Pilates for like a month.
Ah!
He said, "You're no more running for you." He had me go take Pilates for a month, worked on my hips, and then and that helped me run. So
Mhm.
ever since that point, I really started paying attention to my breath, and then also other people as well.
Mhm.
And to your point, I know if I'm all twisted up, if I'm stressed out, if I've got a lot going on, I go do a yoga class during the middle of the day. At the end of class, I'm like, huh, everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good.
That is us getting our nervous system back into ventral vagal, which is the life is possible. That's a part of our nervous system where life feels possible, where we're not in a stress response. And that's where we want to be. And so that essentially yoga and breathing being the regulation tool that resets us back into that part of our nervous system. And the more often we do that, it's easier to find our way back home. Like the more often we do that, we're like, we can find that path
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Are you a cold plunger?
I'm not. And I know that I know it's good for me, but I'm so adverse to cold water. I have been my whole life. It's so stressful for me.
Well,
I do lots of good things for my body though. So that's where I gotta draw the line.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is because I've found a cold plunge, because I talk about doing I used to do yoga during the middle of the day, and yoga takes at least an hour if you're taking a yoga class anyways. And a cold plunge can take 90 seconds, 3 minutes. And that you have to focus on your breath, and you have to connect with your breath. And so, and focused on my breath, I forget if I'm stressed out, if I'm twisted up, I do a cold plunge for 3 minutes. I'm like, everything's okay. It's the
Nice.
same. It's the same thing. It's very similar.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah, I've
much
heard it explained
quicker.
in that way. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
not
let's
this.
talk about nervous system allyship in recovery. I've never heard that before. I saw that you wrote that somewhere, and so I've never heard it before. So there's probably a lot of people out there that have never heard that. So tell me what that means.
Well, I talk a lot about the nervous system and polyvagal theory in particular. I have some resources that I can give you I have tons of yoga classes and things online on YouTube for free. So I'll leave you some of that more detailed.
Great.
But essentially, to be an ally is like to work with, is to befriend, to work with a part of ourselves that often has been neglected. And if we don't understand the structure and the map of our nervous system, then we're just like winging it, which is what most of us are doing. And we're just kind of going on the hamster wheel of like what we've done in the past, essentially, because the nervous system and the brain, it likes to work in patterns. It likes to do the thing that it's always done. And we don't necessarily want to do the thing we've always done. So we have to kind of understand where we are so we can be able to shift it. So in polyvagal theory, there's like 3 different types. There's 3 different parts of our nervous system. And the ventral, I like to do the light system. So like ventral would be green. Imagine like a traffic light system. And this is where life feels possible. It feels like maybe you're not excited, but it just feels like this is okay. I can manage this. We know that feeling. I like to do it with the sighs sometimes. Like, so you can imagine like a good day, maybe it's sunny, it feels good, your dog is there. So if you sigh, you visualize that and you sigh, it's kind of like, like it's just kind of that. You can feel it in your body. And then luckily we're wired to be able to survive. So our nervous system has very intelligently created these 2 different stress responses. So it used to be kind of like rest or digest, fight or flight. And it's like the switch, but it's really not. It's like a dial. And there's a couple different ways in which we perceive and mitigate threat. And one of them is we'll go to yellow on the nervous system. This is sympathetic. So this is when we're mobilized. All of a sudden we have all this energy and we're not really sure what to do with it yet, but we might run, we might fight, we might need to, call for help. We don't know what we're going to do, but it's this like frenetic energy. And this can be all the way from like, I don't think they sent that email they said they were going to do. They always do this. Or I knew they didn't, did he really? It's kind of suspicious. Like, did they really empty the dishwasher like they said they were? Or it might be like you hear footsteps down the hall and this is going to be trouble. Imagine both of these instances. And then you would sigh, would be like, or you might be frustrated. It could be like, or you might be angry. Like all of this is a different registration in the nervous system. This is this energy that needs to go somewhere and it's not sure where it needs to go yet. But we live in this a lot. It's the shoulders are raised. We're a little bit unsure, or maybe we're agitated and frustrated. So that's kind of, this is one way in which we protect ourselves, but we can get stuck there. The other one is the red light, and this is dorsal vagal. And this is whenever we encounter threat, but we recognize that doing something about it isn't going to help us. So like you can't fight our way out of this. We're not going to be able to outrun this. So you can imagine like an animal would likely, you could just play dead. If you can't outrun the thing, you might hide from the thing.
Okay.
So this is dorsal. And this is when actually the system shuts down. Lizards do this. This is the oldest part of our brain. So there's hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And this is the oldest one, is that we shut down. This is disassociation. This is even just a feeling of helplessness. Like, I like to imagine like you're arguing with somebody and you're like, I need you to do this because you said you were going to do it. But when you realize that what you're saying isn't getting you anywhere, you're just like, whatever. That's the switch into dorsal. That's the switch of like, you mobilize your energy to make something change, or you just say, it's never going to change. So in here, this can also be disassociation. This can also be just shut it all down. I don't want to feel. In our usage, this could be, we use to get into these modes. We use to feel something big. We use to not feel at all. You can even think about it there, but this would be the red light. So here's the helplessness, the hopelessness, that nothing's ever going to change. And then to sigh in that state, there's really not a lot of energy. It's like, there's really nothing there. And these are the different states, and they're all protective, and we're meant to go through all of them. But what's vagal tone, I'm sure you've heard about the vagus nerve, if you're doing kind of maybe some cold plunges, is the vagus nerve is connecting all of these. But vagal tone, a healthy vagal tone, means that we move in between all of these states. And then we find our way back home to green, which is, I think I can do this. I think this is manageable. But whenever a car comes, you're able to move when you need to move. Or whenever you're in danger, you're able to, to get out of it or to mitigate it whenever you need to as well. And essentially, all of these things are happening without us knowing them. But when we encounter trauma and our response is to run or to shut down, we in our life now may not be experiencing the same thing. But because we've created the pattern and our body wants to do the same thing that it's always done, we often respond in ways that aren't appropriate to the current situation. So if you ever like overreacted or done something, and you're like, it wasn't appropriate, like that doesn't even fit.
Right.
It's a nervous system response. It's a trauma response. So when we can understand the map and then understand our personal map, then we can do things to help repattern. So that's essentially what I mean by nervous system allyship, is that instead of being ran by our nervous system, we are able to become an active operator of it. And we have to know it mentally, but we also have to know it in the body. And luckily, the body is the way in. And we have all these knobs and levers in our body, like breath, like temperature, like movement, like shaking, like sighing, all of these different things that we can work with in order to repattern. So it's about learning the methods in which we can get to know and support our nervous system.
Can you give the listeners a couple of basic things that they can do to start repatterning the nervous system?
I think first it's to kind of understand where you live, like what's your home away from home, like where's your tendency, where do you tend to go? If you tend to be in yellow, which is frenetic, then what you need to do, what is supportive, is the soothing. Is to find ways that you can settle. Some things that are really nice for the nervous system is, I just like to hum, actually. And a lot of animals do this. I used to have alpacas, and when they're anxious, they hum. And so it's actually, it stimulates the vagus nerve. It's kind of like an internal om. If for those of you all that do yoga, you can just do it inside your body, and it actually is really soothing, and it's on the spot. And you can just, it feels really, really nice. Any type of shaking really helps. And I think that shaking kind of work for both. So if you're really stressed, you can kind of expel the energy through shaking, finding your way back into green. into kind of safety. But then also if you're in dorsal, which means you're shut down, you can't go from red to green. You have to use energy to get to green. So you kind of have to go through the yellow. You have to get energy to get out of red in order to get into green. They call it the autonomic hierarchy, which means that you can't bypass it. So you have to utilize some sort of energy to get you out of it. So the shaking, if you're feeling really like, on the couch, can't get up, life isn't worth it, to actually just invite some movement. And sometimes it's just a little bit, and then it can be a little bit more. And then you can, really kind of something vigorous. It can move you into yellow. From there, you can move into green. So it depends on where you're at and depends on where you want to go.
Well, doesn't everybody want to get to green?
Everybody does, but we don't always want to be in green because there's some things that we need to do that aren't going to be in green. We're not always going to be comfortable. Sometimes we have to do things often that we don't want to do. We need to go and have that conversation that we don't want to have. We need to go and follow up on a diagnosis that we don't want to. Like, we have to have that active energy. So yellow and red are not bad. They're actually really valuable. Play is in yellow. If you play sports, that's in yellow. But it's like a mix of yellow and green. You're safe, but it's also like, there's adrenaline and it's fun. Orgasm is in yellow. Like there's lots of good things that are in yellow as well. Right. So it's like, it's knowing where you need things, but we do want green to be the home. We want green to be the baseline.
Okay.
I'll leave you a couple. I have some pretty good short videos on YouTube that explain that a little bit better. And this actually changes your world, because it's also the way that we see the world. You can imagine seeing through those lenses. Whatever state of the nervous system we're in is the reality in which we see, because something might be happening objectively, but we see it subjectively through the way that we're feeling. If I'm stressed and I see a situation, I'm going to interpret that situation differently than if I'm like, yeah, cool, this looks good. Like it really changes your world if you can recognize, I'm feeling this way and it's changing the way that I'm seeing this. It'll change your relationships. It'll change your life. It'll change the world actually without changing the world, because we don't have control over the world, but we do have control over the way in which we interpret it.
Right. How do you feel yoga supports your recovery today?
For me, it's my home base. It's kind of like, it's me coming back home to green. It's coming back home to myself. It's a place where, I get into child's pose or downward dog, and I'm just like, I'm just coming home. It feels like I'm coming home, and I don't practice every day. I might get into downward dog real quick every day or something, just to like move a little bit, but I don't have like, a long practice every day, but it's my foundation. And I teach retreats, I teach trainings. Now I get to teach other people to be teachers, and it's a foundation for so much. And it's so much more about the yoga and about the asana and the breath. It's a self-inquiry journey. And I knew somehow that in the beginning that I would never be bored if I did this path. And I haven't yet. And now it's blended with recovery. It's blended with, it's a beautiful foundation to really explore life.
Is there a question that you wanted me to ask you today?
I don't think so. I didn't have any agenda.
Okay. Tell me about Emerge Recovery, or where can people find you? Tell me a little more about you and how people can find you.
You can find more than you want to know about me if you Google Cold Chance, but on Cold Chance Yoga is my website. I have a YouTube channel there's probably 1,000 videos out. I've been teaching for about 8 years online. I run a course called Emerge Recovery, and it is created for the people who don't feel like they fit. They're like the people that are trying to maybe seek a different way of life that don't feel like they fit in some of the current boxes. So we blend in, they're for the rebels. I guess that's kind of how I was creating it for people like me. Okay. We blend in internal family systems, Buddhism, yoga, some modern psychology. We have trauma, nervous system. I have a lot of amazing therapists come in and help and weave this program, breath work. And it's a deep self-inquiry program. We meet about 4 times a week for 8 weeks. it's it's big. It's online, but it's a big it's shifting. I'm really proud of it. Um,
who would be interested in your program?
we have people from about 70% of people are substance, but we also have people that are dealing with food issues. We really kind of turn recovery and addiction into a human issue, which is the way that Buddhism sees it, is that all of us have this part of us that wants. All of us has an addict part. So we look at it kind of through that lens. And it's somebody who's really interested in looking at it through different lenses. Somebody who doesn't want to, I really want people to, while this is a human issue and we share that, it manifests in so many different ways. So the encouragement is to kind of build your own program around this, that I recognize that it's unique for everyone. So we give a lot of information and then we help you curate what that looks like moving forward.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're coming up to the end of the hour, and that does it for my time with Cole Chance. Cole, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. I got a lot out of it. And thanks everyone for watching. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of I Love Being Sober. If you found this video to be of value, be sure to like it, subscribe to our channel if you want to see more videos, leave a comment if you have a question, if you've got something to say. Camelback Recovery provides treatment services for people struggling with mental health, mental illness, addiction, alcoholism. So if you or someone you know is struggling, be sure to reach out to us. You can go to our website, camelbackrecovery.com, or our information is in the comments section below. And we provide everything from detox, inpatient, outpatient treatment, sober living, recovery coaching, sober companion services. So either we'll be able to help you or we'll be able to refer you to people or treatment centers that might be a better fit. So I will see you in the next video.